Huzzah! 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 Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Dæmons, written, credited by Guy Leopold. However, he doesn't actually exist. It was a pseudonym for two writers, Barry Lett and Robert Solomon, and it's directed by Christopher Barry. That's right. This is the last 5-part story, I believe, of the classic era, and this is probably one of the most well-regarded, well-documented stories in the show's history. Years ago, when I was a kid, I considered this my favourite Doctor Who story by a long shot. It was one of those stories that when I got the chance to watch it on VHS, I would put it on as many times as I could. It had such a great horror atmosphere, a Hammer horror feel. And there's something about this story that really gravitates people towards it, as there were many documentaries made about this particular story, especially with the setting of the village. It's become kind of like a tourist attraction to go and visit where they filmed Dæmons. And as well, it has two sequels. One of them's called Demons Run, I believe it's called. I could be wrong, with Kate Stewart, and another one with a character from this story, which I'm hoping I will be tackling those stories. However, I haven't got them yet as recording this video, so that might be way later down the line. So do expect them, just don't expect them anytime soon. But anyway, this 5-part story is considered by many to be one of the best stories in the show's history. And like I said, for a long time it was my favourite. However, more recent viewings I've had with it in the past few years, I started noticing stuff that really distracted my enjoyment of it. Still a fantastic story, don't get me wrong. It is still in my top 10 Doctor Who stories of all time. However, it's not my number 1 anymore, for points that I will explain. But let me get into the story. So, what happens is that the Doctor is... The first thing we get is basically a great explanation about how magic works in Doctor Who, which is, like, if you've seen the movie Thor, it's kind of like that. Magic is just science that we don't understand. And I think we have a great scene explaining it, as Jo Grant is basically, she believes in magic, and she tells her doctor to the theory that she has about magic, and how if nobody can explain it, no one in the universe, then it must be magic. And then the doctor basically is talking to her, it's like, that's ridiculous. And then Betsy, the doctor's car, starts moving on its own, and then it comes back into the car. Doctor starts talking to it, and it's like, are you sorry? And then it like beeps twice on the horn, and then the doctor's like, good, now get back in your parking spot, you naughty girl. And he asks Jo to try to explain it, because if she can't explain it, then it must be magic. And she's like, I can't explain it. And then the doctor brings out a remote control from his pocket, explaining it. So what a fantastic scene to set up the basic premise of the story, the meaning of the story, in that magic and science not so different, and illusions and stuff. And then whilst this is going on, we have then on the other side of, basically, I think it's the country, we get bits about the Devil's Hump, and this guy, Professor Horner, he tries to dig out what he believes is treasure, but there's some protests from a character called Miss Hawthorne, and she believes that it will bring catastrophe as the dig is happening on a specific day, which might bring out the devil. Yeah, this is a big talking point about this story. It deals with Satanists. Well, not really, but it tackles the theme of Satanism. You got very devilish imagery, you've got imagery of Satan worship, and when we find out who's leading the Satan cult, it is just perfect. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So we get this great banter between these two individuals. Well, we don't get banter between them, but their different viewpoints we get to show a lot. And the story does great at introducing some minor characters. Myth Horshorn, who is the one that gets the spin-off that I was talking about earlier. She's this fantastic character. She basically believes that she's a white witch, which, for those who don't know, it's like a cult thing, and they're basically good witches, and you've got black witches, which are like evil witches, and she basically believes that she's a good witch that predicts like the devil come in, and she protects people from like curses and stuff and hexes, and she's basically protesting against this dig. However, Professor Horner, I just love him. He's not in it that long. In fact, I think he gets killed off in, I think, the first episode. But my God, he's so memorable. He's basically just in it for himself, and he talks about like that he's only really doing this because he's got a book about the treasure coming out the day after. So he's doing this for basically a big publicity stunt. And he has some very great scenes. One of my favourite scenes is somebody who's working at the television station, which we'll get into, talks to him and says, what happens if the devil does appear? And then he says something like, get an initiative, use your initiative, interview him, of course. So that's a fantastic scene. Now, about this news broadcast, it is clearly stated that this has been reported on the BBC News. Not any BBC News, BBC Three. Yeah. Well, you see, what happened here is that back in the old days, back when this story came out, I believe obviously BBC One was around, and I believe BBC Two has just come out. So they predicted that BBC Three would come out, and they wanted these unit stories originally to set slightly in the future, just a few years in the future, so that so some of the more high sci-fi stuff could be believable, but it could still feel like present day. So they only set it like a few years after the story. And so they predicted that BBC Three was going to be a thing. And so we get BBC Three in this story. The problem is that BBC Three came out in 2003. So either this story, with its very clearly people in the 70s dresses and hairstyles and stuff, is set in 2003 or onwards, or in the Doctor Who canon, BBC Three came out many years before the real universe BBC Three. Completely tangent, doesn't actually mean anything to the story. It's just a really funny fact that this story predicted BBC Three about 3 or 4 decades early. There you go. But there you go. So we also get introduced to a character, a landlord called Bert the landlord. And like I said, this story has great, memorable side characters. And Bert, something about him, I just always constantly remember. One of my favourite bits that always sticks out in my head is that they're in the bar. This is before the Doctor is even like in the scene. And these group of people are talking about what if the devil does appear, if the dig, happens, and he's like, well, if he does come, he can have my best room, my bread and butter. And for some reason, the way he says it always sticks out in my mind. And it's also really funny as well, as it's kind of, this kind of leads into a foreshadow of his character, as, spoiler, he's part of the satanic cult. So, there you go. Now, the Doctor, he sees this all on the news, and he basically is opposed to it because of something we're not quite sure yet. So, he runs to the Devil's Hump, but before he even gets there, the dig has already happened, and Professor Horner and the Doctor gets basically frozen. Horner, I think, dies at this point, but the Doctor, being a Time Lord, survives. So, in episode 2, he's mainly out of the action. And whilst this is going on, we get some lovely scenes of Joe Grant keeping the Doctor company. And Joe Grant in his story is just great to watch. I know there's a few people who don't like her character, but she's just so sweet and innocent. She might be a bit baffling. She might be a bit of a typical companion with a constant questioning and getting into trouble so that people can save her. But she's just so sweet and innocent and lovable. And Katie Manning's performance is so great that you kind of pass it as if, like, this is just what her character is. That's what she does. So I personally like it. But that's just me. And then back to Miss Hawthorne. She goes to the local church to try and get some help from the vicar. Now she meets this like disciple man, and he's another memorable character. We never know a thing about him. Clearly he's controlled, but we never learn anything about him, like his life previous or stuff. So for all we know, he might not be controlled, he might do things, but I don't know, something about him just sticks out in my mind, like everything else in this story. And so he explains that the vicar is away suddenly. So we have like a supply vicar, I guess. There you go. And then she's like, okay, I don't like him that much, but if he's willing to help, I will talk to him. And then the vicar turns up. It's the Master. Yeah, he just appears as the vicar, and in my opinion, this is Robert Delgato's best performance as the Master. He's sly, he's manipulative, he's also posh, lovable, cunning as well, and it clearly shows that he's having a blast as well. I really like how in most of the cases he doesn't actually need to say anything. He just clicks his fingers and points, and his henchmen basically know what's happening. It's also in this story that he has kind of more mythical powers, as he seems to control the weather to a degree, and he also can control a stone gargoyle that comes to life named Bok, which is a really stupid name, but stick with me here, he's a really cool, silent henchman for the Master. And we also learn as well that he tries to control Hawthorne, but she doesn't fall for it. She works out there's something wrong with him, so she goes looking for help elsewhere. And then we also learn then the Master is the leader of a satanic cult that's trying to bring the devil. How is that not the coolest idea for a Doctor Who story in history? The Master bringing up the devil to try and conquer Earth. What? You can't get away with that anymore. Can you imagine now with Shasha Darwin being a Satan worshipper? No, you can't. Not even John Sims, not Michelle Gomez, not even Anthony Ainley may have gone that far. Only 70s Robert Delgato's Master. Fantastic premise. And he controls basically the village. He controls most of the village anyway, as most of them are part of his cult. And later on, we see him trying to convert other people into, basically the entire village, into his power. And yeah, like I said, the Master trying to bring out Devil. What more do you want? Go watch it. It's called the Dæmons. Whatever that is supposed to be, an A-N-E, M-O-N-S. Dæmons. Go watch it. There you go, man. Rant over. So, yeah, we get some great moments with the Master and his leader and cult and stuff. And the story also has a very rare moment in which the Master is the one in peril for a cliffhanger, which is probably one of the more iconic cliffhangers for the show, with the Master calling out for help as he summons the demon Azal, and he basically doesn't expect him to be so powerful, so he kind of like cowers and is like, no, stay back, stay back. And yeah, great cliffhanger. This story, for the most part, has very great cliffhangers. One of the most memorable ones is that when the Doctor recovers, he goes back to the Devil's Hump to try and figure out what was in the hump. Try to say that 10 times fast. And whilst this is going on, the Master sends Bok to kill the Doctor, and the Doctor and Joe are in this small cavern, and they're talking just fine and stuff, and then all of a sudden Bok just comes out of through the corridor and gets his fingers out like that. Now, we previously that Bok kills people with his fingers. He kind of like shoots, which for some reason, here's the thing as well. For some reason, I always remember it as Bok spitting, stuff that makes people invisible and die. I don't know where I've gotten that from, but I don't know if it's like a Mandela effect. I don't know if I'm the only person who's remembers this spitting Bok. If you do remember it, please let me know. Please convince me I'm not crazy. But anyway, he shoots things from his hands, basically, which kills people. And that's a fantastic cliffhanger. The resolution of it is a bit weak, I will admit. The Doctor gets a metal spanner and starts chanting stuff. I think it's in, he says like some sort of alien language, some sort of like alien Latin. And Bok, because he's this creature basically that believes in magic, he doesn't process it and he thinks the Doctor's like protected, and so he kind of retreats. But the Doctor later explains that he was just singing a gibberish line. I'm trying to remember what he says. It's something like, go to sleep and close your eyes, or at least 3 of them, or something like that. Very great line. Don't get me wrong, it's a great resolution to that cliffhanger, but I think it could have been a bit stronger. You could have had a bit more action-packed John Pertwee moments. Speaking of action-packed John Pertwee moments, did I mention this has action-packed John Pertwee moments? John Pertwee has a great moment where he's on his bike and he's trying to get to the Brigadier who's behind this barrier. Oh, by the way, in this story we get a unit character called Osgood, who might be related to Osgood from the Stephen Moffat era. I believe they somewhere in like a book or in a comic, it stated that he is her uncle or father, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. Either way, the Moffat character Osgood is a reference to Osgood in the Dæmons, so there you go. But anyway, back to the John Pertwee action scenes. We get a great moment of the Doctor on his bike, and then he's getting shot at by Bert, the landlord, who at this point we learn is working for the Master. And then the Doctor runs away. And we also get another scene of the Doctor and Joe Grant on the bike. And they get chased down by a helicopter as Mike and Benton use the helicopter to get to the small village. And the Doctor doesn't realise at the moment that it's not been piloted. It's been piloted by one of the Master's henchmen. We get a great action scene of the Doctor being chased by a helicopter, and the helicopter comes over them head, trying to angle them so that they would fall straight into a heat barrier that will burn them to death. However, the Doctor skids just quite close enough in a great action scene. Actually, now that I remember it, I think it was actually in Bessie. So there you go. And then the helicopter was destroyed. The actual clip of the helicopter being destroyed is actually stock footage from, I believe, from Russia with Love, or like a deleted scene from Russia with Love. And the clips are so seamless. I think like the lighting of the sky is the same. I think the helicopter is exactly the same. Now, a lot of people generally believe that the BBC destroyed a helicopter for this story. However, that's not true. Yeah, some great action moments, some great scenery, and yeah, so there's a lot of great moments to like. So I don't like two particular scenes, which I'm going to get into. Scene number one, the Mayday scene. Anyone who talks about this story will admit that the Mayday scene kind of sucks. It's kind of strange, because for one of the best Doctor Who stories, it has probably one of the weakest classic Who scenes in the show's history. But let me set the stage. The Doctor's trying to get back to a pub. At this point in time, the Master has but he's basically put fear into every of the civilians as he kills somebody with Bach thing, and the Master basically is like, just enjoy May Day as if nothing's happened. And so outside in the village, they're doing the May Day dance with the ropes and the slapping of the bottoms, which is just really funny to see in a family-friendly show, but I digress. And the Doctor's basically in a rush to get to this church. Now, you would think, even though he's trying, you can see that, he's going to be in trouble getting through these people. So he would just walk around. But no, he kind of just walks like straight into the May Day parade, and the way he gets like caught is just ridiculous. It's just stupid. There were so many ways he could have clearly just gotten himself out of it. And there was so much better ways that he could have been captured. I mean, one of them had a gun, for Christ's sakes. He could have just walked past, one of them spots him and then shoots like a warning shot or something. Something simple like that. But we get this really stupid scene of the Doctor being tied up to a Mayday pole, and the citizens just decide to burn him. Now, at this point, they're not really mind controlled with the Master. They basically fear the Master. So I don't know. It just seems really strange. But I do really like the resolution of this, where Hawthorne, she makes a plan with Benton, and she comes out, and she's basically like, how dare you attack this man, the great wizard, Qui Quai Quod, which, here's a fun fact, Qui Quai and Quod are three Latin words which could mean who. So, there you go. There's a little Doctor Who reference there. There you go. And she tells the Doctor to, with his mind, destroy a lamp. And the Doctor's like, okay. Because he doesn't know what's going on. And he's like, lamp, I order you to shatter. And then it smashes. And everybody's like, what? And we find out later on it's Benton who's like taking the shot. And we also get another scene of the Doctor using Bessie to distract someone. And Hawthorne basically believes that the Doctor is an actual wizard, but no, he's basically like, no, it's science, you idiot. So yeah, that's one scene I don't like, but it has a great resolution to it, so I can't really fault it that bad. However, the conclusion of the story, the how they resolve it, is just ridiculous. But let me set it up. Joe Grant and Mike Yates, they are in the cavern where the Master's doing his Satan worshipping, and he's basically going to ask Zal for all of his power, because we later learn that the Dæmons, the ones that look like the devil, are actually an alien race that basically come to less civilized societies and do experiments on them to make them more intelligent and more civil. But the Master's trying to use the fact that we are a bit nut in the head and we cause wars and stuff, to let Azal give the Master his power so that the Master can control humanity. That's just a great premise. However, Joe gets involved, and then the Doctor goes into the crypt to try and save her. And Zal is like, oh yes, these humans need to be taught a lesson, so I'll give this power, but not to you, Master. I'll give it to the Doctor. And the Doctor's like, no, don't you see, I want to see the universe, not destroy it, stuff like that. Still great moment, still great scene, nothing problem yet. And so Zal's like, you are an idiot for not taking this power, I'll give it to the Master. And the Master's like, okay, but first, will you kill this man, the Doctor, for me? And so he attacks the Doctor, but Joe Grant gets in the way and is like, no, don't hurt the Doctor, hurt me instead. Great moment, great Joe Grant trying to take the bullet for the Doctor, even though the Doctor does get attacked. However, Azal does something really weird. He starts glowing and he's like, no, this does not compute, as if he's a robot. And it's like, I do not understand, emotions does not compute, self-destruct. And then everybody gets ran out of the church as the church starts to explode with Azal dying in it. Yeah, that's really pants, and there's no way around it. It's just a really bad way to end a fantastic story. It is kind of just a plot point, because the main villain is really the Master. Azal is just a big head figure for the Master to use as a plot point, but still, it still just feels really off. But just like out of nowhere, he starts acting like a robot and doesn't understand the concept of self-sacrificing to save someone else's life, and so he decides to self-destruct. I mean, what? So yeah, that's a bit pants. But we get a great scene then of the Master trying to escape in Bessie, and the Doctor uses Bessie then to come back to the unit soldiers, and the Master goes into prison. So this ends the long Master after Master story run that we have, as this is a conclusion to season 8. And there you go, that's the Dæmons. Fantastic story, well written, well acted, well directed. I forgot to mention Christopher Barry's directing is phenomenal. He gives it such a Hammer horror feel. If you like Hammer horror, especially the Dracula films, you're gonna love this story. I especially like the scenes in the church, at the bottom of the church, in the caverns, and any time when it's set at night, especially the opening in part 1, where we see some guy in the weather getting killed with his poor dog. So yeah, forgot to mention that. Fantastically directed story. However, that ending and that Mayday scene does kind of hurt this story a bit for me. Especially the ending. There's no way to really justify it. But it's still one of my favourite Doctor Who stories. And like I said, it was my favourite Doctor Who story for a long time. Might be because of that ending I've started to realise it isn't a very well written ending. Or maybe I just watched more Doctor Who stories that I just so happen to like. But it did drop to still in my top 10, just not my number 1 story. So that's the Dæmons. You know what? I can't actually remember what story's next. So join me next time for the next Doctor Who adventure where we have no master in the Doctor Who marathon. I shall see you then.